Welcome to the Billionaire Lifestyle Podcast with your host, Emmett Muckles. Please visit iTunes, Stitcher, or emmettmuckles.com to listen to all the episodes for free.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Billionaire Lifestyle Podcast. I am your host, named after my father, who was named after his father. So that's three of us, but my name's different. So you know me as Emmett. Today I have a beautiful, awesome, wonderful guest that I have been waiting to talk to. You know, sometimes you get these things that come to you and you never really grasp just how important that union will be. And then everything aligns and Wemi comes into your life. And here's the best thing about it. You know that day that we're always talking about, that day that we always dreading on Sunday night, that Monday? She's going to help us reinvent ourselves. She's going to help us put it all together. I'm not going to mutilate her last name. So I'm going to ask her to introduce herself because I've learned a thing or two when I did this podcast, especially when your name is Emmett Muckles. It's going to get mutilated. Wemi, how are you doing?
I am wonderful, Emmett. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. And you did such a good job with my name. I feel like I don't need to do much with it, but it's Wemi and last name is Opakunle. But like I said, everyone always, just like you, everyone says my name wrong. So I've just become Wemi, like Madonna. I've just chosen to go with one name.
And see, for me, it's Muckles. It's my last name. So wherever I go, it's like, hey, Muckles, what's going on?
It's a good one. I can't say that I've met a Muckles before. So you are unique in that sense.
Yeah. You know, it's that, you know, people say, it's really funny because people ask me, where'd you get that name from? I said, some dude owned some of my parents so that's where it came from.
Like I didn't really have a choice there.
It is, but it works out. So,
yeah,
you know,
I think sometimes we have a choice and sometimes we don't. My name, for example, I'm Nigerian, and in the Nigerian culture and the Yoruba culture, names are so powerful and they have such a meaning. Every child, we have a naming ceremony for each child that's born. And it's a really big deal because this is the name that follows, you know, both first name and last name. There's a history behind the name. There's a purpose behind the name. So even if you start a business, for us, the one of the most important parts is the name. Once you give it a name, it brings it to life.
Yeah.
So there's so much power behind that name.
So I want to ask you this, because this just came up in my head as you were talking about names, because as we venture through life, we become different people.
Yeah.
And in some cultures, you get to choose your name because you're a different person. So about every 7 years, we're a different individual. As a matter of fact, I think there's a term that's called our Saturn year, which is like when we're 28, because that's when everything really starts and you really are a different person than you were.
Absolutely.
Is that prevalent in your culture that you grew up in?
Yeah, I think that for us, it's, you know, when I moved to the States, for example, I couldn't understand when people would feel bad about getting older because we cherish just getting older in the Yoruba culture. I think there's so much wisdom and knowledge associated with, you know, growth as you continue to grow older. And that also includes change, right? It means that you are a different person than where you started from. And so for us, it's always, you know, we look at it, we welcome that change, we embrace that change, whether it's in 7 years or, you know, 12 years or 21 years or, you know, in your 70s and 80s and your 40s, et cetera. It's such a huge part of who we are, that change, that, you know, we're so excited to embrace it. So I think if you can't choose your name, you can still choose who you become, right?
That's true.
And if you're able to embrace that part, you know, that means that you are truly in control of your destiny because you are in control of those choices that you're making. So you can at least embrace the things that you can't change, like your age, getting older, but you can make something really great out of it. You can use all of that wisdom and all of that knowledge and make it a better life for yourself.
You know, my wife is European descent. She's Austrian, as a matter of fact. And she's 17 years younger than me. Mm. And I said, you know, why'd you marry this old man? She's like, because we'll age the same.
Yeah, it's true. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. It's the same for everybody. And that's why it's always hilarious to me, that we are still talking about issues of race, and we're still talking about all of these things that ultimately don't matter, because we all bleed red, and we all age the same. We all go back to that same source that we came from. And there's really not much of a difference. I've never met anyone that aged differently. Physically, we can, see some changes. And, I think with whether if you're Black or of African descent, they're like, oh, Black don't crack. And you age differently. Your skin looks great. And yes, some of us have that advantage, but I think the other part of it is just that the source is the same.
This is what's funny. You and I are just sitting here talking like we've known each other for all life. We haven't even got to the subject yet, which is, thank God it's Monday. We just been kicking it.
I love it. I love it when that happens. You gotta let it just happen naturally, right?
Right. But we're going to get to the meat of the subject. We'll get to the rest of it a little bit later. But you wrote a book, Thank God It's Monday. How did that come about for Mondays? And what's really funny is my wife and I were having this discussion about 4 days ago, and it wasn't even related to our interview. She was like, we really should rethink Mondays, because she calls Sunday pre-Mondays.
It is. It's funny. There's a statistic that says that I think it's like 76% of Americans have Monday blues in anticipation, or Sunday night blues in anticipation of Mondays. And there's so many weird and strange statistics around Monday. I think there's something about 43% of American women or something like that feel that Mondays, they feel the least attractive on Mondays. So Monday has a bad rap. The book came about because I was also miserable. I hated Mondays. I could not enjoy my Sundays because of the thought of Monday, because of the thought of what was to come. And so I'd be at dinner with my brother, for example, and trying to be present and be in this moment and really enjoy. And there would just be this overwhelming sense of sadness that was looming over me. And I would think, what is going on? And it's because Monday was coming. And, there are a lot of reasons why a lot of us hate Mondays. We're not walking on purpose. We hate our jobs. We hate our bosses. There's a lot of conflict there. Time away from family. There's so many reasons. And so I think you have to ask yourself why. And for me, I just wasn't fulfilled. It was unhappiness that was coming from unfulfilledness and not really feeling like I was walking my path and my purpose. And so what I started to do was I've been in the fashion space as a blogger for quite some time. So I always wrote in the fashion space, but I always leaned also into spirituality, because I know that nothing on the outside really matters if the inside is truly broken. So I started writing these words of inspiration and encouragement. I would write about anxiety. I would write about finding your purpose and following your dreams and patience with time. And people started responding to it. And so that was 7 years ago. And that's how these messages started coming. And then I started publishing it every Sunday night in anticipation for Monday. And that's how the book came about.
So with that, how has it changed your existence on this planet and your interaction with people who you would react with or interact with prior to the book and after the book? Do they see you differently, and have you changed some opinions about their life?
I'd like to say yes. And, someone made a comment that the illustration on my book, it's a stick figure, and it represents the Y, and it's just a stick figure that's jumping up. And, this was the best compliment that I can say that I've ever received is a friend of mine bought the book, and she reached out to me on Instagram, and she circled that stick figure, and she says, "This is how I've always seen you." And it's just a stick figure literally just jumping in the air. And the reason why I knew two things when I wanted to create this book is that I wanted it to be yellow, because yellow just represented happiness and pure joy. And I wanted it to be a stick figure there because we can't judge stick figures. That happiness, that arms up in the air, legs, out there, that's who we are at our core. And I think that has always been who I was. And it's always been, it's who I am. And I think that life situations, which are always in flux and they change often, cause a lot of unhappiness in my life. But the moment that I recognized that the things that I couldn't change, I needed to leave alone. And the things that I could, I could take inspired action on. I think that my mindset changed. And so the way that I started approaching Monday was, in that way. I came up with this formula called BLAST, which I can share a little bit later on in the interview, to help me deal with some of the anxieties and some of the unhappiness. And again, just leaving the things that I couldn't change and some of the things that I could. So I would like to say that I've always been a happy person, but I'd like to say that I'm more present, in my journey, and recognizing the power that I have over my journey. And I think that people relate to that and see that. And when I get emails from people who are responding to those messages, it actually shows in that. And they're like, you don't know what this means to me. This is exactly how I feel. This message touched me. And, I'm just saying, I'm just trying to also feed my soul. So I'm glad that these messages are feeding your soul too.
So let me backtrack.
Yeah.
You said you're originally from Nigeria.
Yes.
When did you come here?
I moved here when I was 13. So I turned 14 in the States.
Oh, that's a very precarious time for any individual because you're transitioning into another 7.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So when you came here, what was the adjustment? Because it is America is a different dynamic, and most Americans don't understand things that are outside of America. And most people who are outside of America only get what we give you to visualize. Because my wife says it's all a lie.
I love your wife already. I didn't meet her.
She's like, it's all a lie. She was like, you guys don't have, and some people are going to get on me about this. She's like, you guys really don't have as many freedoms as you think you do. You have to pay for everything.
Yeah.
So when you was your community, were you more situated in your community prior and then had to adapt to this newfound community and think that might have affected your spirituality coming, into your own in America?
I think there are two things. My mom makes a joke, which she says that, when I was little, she met a prophet who said that she had given birth to an old woman, and it kind of freaked her out. And she said, when I was little, my eyes would always follow her. And she was like, there's this consciousness in this presence in this baby. And she was a little nervous about it. She's like, what's happening? What's going on? And she used to say that to me. But I think I started recognizing certain things about myself, certain gifts, for example, dreams and being connected to the divine when I was little, maybe about 5 or 6 years old. My mom and my dad were both great with recognizing that and not saying you are a weird child or you shouldn't be feeling these things, right?
Yeah.
My mom's a pastor and she is one of the most spiritual people that I know, not in terms of religion, but truly present and conscious of, the relationship and who God is and what that means for us as human beings. And so she never said to me, like, you're weird or, you shouldn't be talking like that or thinking like that. So that was the first part of my life where I always recognized something else, but I hadn't fully come into it yet. Coming to the States was a completely different story. I was so excited to come to a different community and space. My parents traveled the world. They'd always known other cultures. So that's all I'd ever known. And so coming to the US, I was so excited to connect with people who were different than me. It was a horrible experience.
Oh, I can understand.
And I came in and kids didn't know anything outside of the US. They thought Africa was a country. And I was like, well, Nigeria is the biggest country in West Africa. And Africa is not a country, it's a continent. And they had all of these misconceptions and misperceptions about, Nigeria. And they were asking me weird questions like, do you live in trees? And do you wear shoes in your country? And it was the strangest thing because we were taught about the world.
Yeah.
But America was only taught mostly about America, or maybe they were taught more and, people just didn't really take an interest in it. So it was very strange because I feel like I actually lost who I was when I moved here.
Yep. I can believe that.
And all of a sudden I became a shell of myself. I was someone who, went to boarding school. I was, active in every sport, debates, public speaking, played every sport imaginable. And I was boisterous and I moved and I became quiet. It was like Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings is one of my favorite books. And she went silent when she experienced trauma. And I feel like I did the same. I wasn't eating. I wasn't going to the dining hall. I was scared of everything. I would just sit in the library and I would read. And so I became a shell of myself. And in that shell, I started observing people. So maybe there was purpose to that, in becoming that shell, because all I did was observe. I observed personalities. I observed the way that people responded and reacted to each other, to teachers, and it was so fascinating. And I didn't come into my own again until I left high school and went into college.
You know what that's our stories are parallel, because I moved from the inner city to this, where I was in the dominant culture in the inner city, to a suburban area where I was just different. And my grades dropped, and my mom was like, "What are you doing?" It wasn't until later that I realized I was going through culture shock.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because people had told me for years as a child, you're in a minority. Yeah, right. Everybody I see around me looks and has the same, even if they are not the same hue, they have the same swag.
Right.
And then you move to a totally different, and someone, you're like, oh, it's true.
Who am I? Exactly. Absolutely. At some point, you become a minority somewhere. Right. And coming from Nigeria, like it's the Yoruba people, my people are very proud people. They believe that the human race originated from there, and they believe that they have proof of it. There's so many stories. I could listen to my grandmother talk about these folk tales, and for every problem or situation that you have, the Yoruba people have an adage or an answer to your problem. And it's you are so proud of it. I can read and write and speak Yoruba, and I'm trilingual. And so I learned that growing up. And so I came here fully knowing myself, even at 13. I was very solid in who I was. And all of that had to shatter in order for me to become something else. So it's very interesting what that transition does to you as a human being, right?
Yeah. So with that, did you ever think about Mondays in your prior life? Did you ever think, the week starts pretty much in the United States, and I'm not sure about everywhere else, because it can be different depending on where you are on this planet. Some days Sunday is the first day of the week.
Yeah.
Some places it's Monday. It depends where you are. So was this in your paradigm where you're thinking, there's a separation, like, okay, that week is done, that period is done, the 7 days, now I'm starting anew.
Yeah.
Was this in your consciousness beforehand, and is just coming to the surface, like this is your divine path that you have to go down for a while and bring back for people?
Yeah, no, I think I've always recognized it. I think a little bit, when I was little, there was always this sense of there's something more. I would look in the mirror. I remember when I was young, and I'd say, who am I? Who am I? Who am I? And I'd literally repeat that. I mean, this is like 5 or 6 years old. Just very strange. But I sensed that there was something more, right? And so when you're going to school, you just think, oh, Monday means homework and all of these things. So there was still this tie into Monday being a day of unhappiness where you start the cycle again. And I think my problem was with the cycle, because I felt that there was more. There had to be more than the cycle. And so that thought grew into my first job, out of college. And then like after that, my second job, my third job. And, I would always think, I'm like, there is something really weird happening here, because we've taken, and I always also would look at this idea of the 9 to 5, which I never understood.
I still don't understand it. It makes no sense.
And it's not saying anything against work. I think that human beings, that we need some structure, something, right? To put our minds to. I'm by no means a lazy person. I like to have purpose, in my life. But what was interesting to me was that we were taking the most valuable thing that we have ever been given, which is time. No one has ever gone back in time or gone forward in time. You can't buy time. Steve Jobs, one of the most powerful innovators out there, he got sick, and the only thing, he had all the money in the world, access to all of the doctors, and the one thing he couldn't have was more time. And we have taken that time, and we have decided to exchange it for a piece of paper that we put numbers on.
Yeah.
The most valuable thing on earth, more valuable than any natural resource. It is the most valuable, because you are so limited when it comes to that. And we have exchanged it. And so again, nothing wrong with work. But, when you spend most of your time doing the things that make you miserable or that you're not happy with, right, you start to realize there's a little bit of an imbalance there. Yeah. So even with kids, is there a better way that we can utilize time and learning other than this, 9 to 4 or 9 to whatever, like school structure? Same thing with the 9 to 5 as adults. Otherwise, we spend most of our time, most of our lives doing these things that are not that great. And then at the end, we reconcile and we only have maybe 10, 20 years left to actually make something out of it.
So how do we go from dreading these things?
Yeah.
You know, we're talking in the context of Mondays, but this is it goes into the broader scope of life, what you're talking about, and going into taking away that dread and finding the opportunity and embracing the joyousness, the living, and celebrating the time that we have for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, whatever you have to do.
Yeah. So I said earlier that I would look in the mirror when I was 6 and ask, who am I? Who am I? Who am I? And when I would ask that question, something would happen. There'd be this hollow feeling. It was almost like I was bending into myself. And then all of a sudden I'd feel weird and I'd pop back out of myself. It's the strangest thing. It's the only way that I can explain that. I don't think it's even explainable.
I know what you're talking about.
Right? And my mom said the same thing. She used to ask herself that too. When she was young, she'd say, who am I? Who am I? And I think the answer to going from dreading to, you know, the other side of it, because I don't think we should be chasing happiness on the other side either. I think it's unrealistic. And, you know, this idea of what happiness means, I think it's kind of BS. And I think a lot of times we just sort of are like, oh, happiness, what does that actually mean? It's like fleeting moments of happiness. But I choose peace instead of happiness, right? So what I say to anyone who's dreading it is look in the mirror and ask yourself, who am I? Who am I? Why are you here? Why are you truly here? Because my belief is that life wants to know itself through us. So what does that actually mean? I think life wants to know itself through Emmett, who's doing a podcast, and Wemi, who's writing a book, and, you know, Stacy out there who's dancing and, you know, like just you can see her body move through music on the stage and through writing and speaking and all of these things. So you need to ask that question. What does life want to know through me? Who am I? What is that purpose? And I think in answering that question, what you can then find out is, well, if I have to still work and I'm doing this 9-to-5 thing, but I'm choosing myself and choosing that gift, because life will ask you at the end of your journey, what have you done with what I've given you? What have you done with the gifts that I've deposited inside of you?
You know, that reminds me of this story and I can't remember where I heard it recently. Someone was questioning, they were transitioning to the other side, and they were talking to this entity, and they were like, I didn't get to do this, and didn't get to do that. How come I didn't have this? And the entity said to the being that was transitioning, was like, you got the most precious thing. You got a life.
You did. Yeah.
And this is what's really mind-boggling is no one is consciously wrapping themselves around the fact that they have a life.
Yeah.
With that comes, in life, they give you free will. So it's what you can make it.
Yeah.
If you can
you can have gifts and do nothing with it.
Yeah.
And at the end of your life, you say, well, I didn't really have this. And, you know, I came from a poor place and this and that. But my theory is that if someone has done it, if anyone has done it, that means it can be done. If Oprah came from, you know, just literally on a farm with nothing, like needing to use the bathroom outside, and she became Oprah, she has done something. She's a human being. She doesn't have 5 legs and 3, like, you know, like eyes. Like, it's just the same. It's the same thing. If someone has done it, that means you have exactly what you need. You have been given what you need in this journey. If you don't have it, then you don't need it. And if you don't have it and you can't get it, then you really don't need it.
That's right. Now, you wrote this book. Thank God it's Monday. 52 inspirational messages to blast away your Monday blues. How should this book be consumed or integrated into one's life?
Yeah. So I love this. Someone sent me a message the other day. They're like, I'm on chapter 22. Is that okay? And I said, honestly, there is no, I'm not going to be overly prescriptive. The way that I wrote it is that, you know, we are in a society right now that consumes so much information, and I love to read. I could be at the library all day long. I used to make my dad drop me off at the library when I was little and just say, I just love being around books. Now, there are people who are not like that. So this book is designed for every Monday of the year. There are 52 Mondays in the year. Mm-hmm. So the goal is for you to read one message per Monday. So you can read it Sunday night, or you can read it Monday morning in time for your work week, or you can go through the entire book. Or sometimes, people say, I just open up the book and I just see what chapter pops to me, because I think that, I truly believe that each message will find you in whenever you need it. So you can open it up and say, oh, how am I feeling today? And that pops up. But I would say the best way to go about it is, have that, feed your soul. Once a week, you think about feeding your body every single day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. This is food for your soul. So think about that on Sunday nights in anticipation for Monday and the rest of the week, and open up a chapter and just feed yourself.
So what brought you to this path that you're on? The speaking, writing a book, the blogging, because they say one of the most prevalent fears is the fear of public speaking. Mm-hmm. And you've embraced so many items. And I say this is really prevalent for people who are not natively born in the United States.
Yeah.
Because people who come from outside of the United States really see the opportunity that Americans don't seem to grasp quite as much as those who are not born literally on this land. So right. What are all the things that kind of stirs your pot? Turn the temperature up. It began to boil, and then you began to manifest.
Yeah, I think a lot of it started when I was little. I have very supportive parents, and I have parents that always push. My mom, would say all the time, "You're a very brave girl. You moved to Los Angeles and you didn't know anyone, and you only had a certain amount in your pocket." And I'm like, she's like, "You were so brave." I'm like, "Mom, I wasn't brave. I was scared." Scared the entire time. I've always been scared. And I'm not going to pretend like I'm not ever scared, but I know myself. I will do it in spite of the fear. That is who I am. And I've learned that early on. I realized this when I was 12 or 11 or 12, I was giving public speeches in front of a group of about, I believe, 300 students. And my hands would shake and sweat up until the moment I opened my mouth to say the first words. I remember I gave a speech about lullabies, and I actually played a lullaby on the piano at the end of the speech. And everyone was like, "That was so great." And I was like, I was shaking the entire time. But all of that, I didn't know then that I would be writing Thank God It's Monday Now. That was when I was 12, 11 years old. And so I think about that, and I think purpose, destiny. But I also think about free will, embracing those things, embracing those lessons, those incredibly hard moments where it's never easy for anyone. Actors will tell you that they take anti-anxiety pills before they go on stage, but yet they keep going back. Right. Why? Purpose. There's something that draws them to it. There's something that connects at their very core with this. And it's the same thing with me. When I write, I almost feel like I'm possessed because I just all these things just flow out. And I say a prayer before I put, pen to paper or, my fingers on my laptop. And I say, whatever needs to come out will come out. These words will find the right people that need them. And then I go. But it's just connecting with your purpose and what you need to do.
Were you ever a model?
I was.
Because you're extremely symmetrical.
Oh, thank you.
This is the non-sexist way of giving a compliment.
It is hilarious. And, I will take it because my sister sent me a picture the other day and she literally said the exact same words, which was hilarious because she's like, you're very symmetrical. And I thought that was hilarious of her. I'll have to tell her this because I thought it was ridiculous. I said to her, I was like, that's hilarious that you're even saying that.
But that's one of the major components of attraction with someone is their symmetry. Or for people or for the society to consider you really attractive is literally symmetry, where everything is even, because mine is not.
Which is funny because you look at yourself and you don't even think that way, or you don't even look at that. And I know that there's, that everyone finds something else attractive. And who even knows is that how do we define symmetry, right? And there are people who see colors in different ways. It's a very interesting concept as to what our perceptions are of other people and what we see, and then what we see of ourselves too.
That's true, because I look at pictures of myself and it's a totally different thing than the mirror.
Right. Absolutely.
It's so bizarre. I did a talk a couple weeks ago and I was like, who's that skinny guy with the big head? That's because I lost weight. But you've done so many things, and you've come from such an open experience. Do you find that sometimes you can't communicate with people because of your wealth of knowledge and experience that you've brought with you through this journey?
I think that, excuse me, I think that curiosity is a big part of our interactions with people, right? And what curiosity requires of you is that you set all ego aside, and that you set everything that you think that you know about a situation or about a person, that you set it all aside, and that you come open to get to know that person. Yeah. So I would say that a huge part of who I've become and who I've learned to become through my experiences, through my relationships, is to be open and to be curious. So, whatever baggage, and I'm not going to lie and say that I go into every single situation free of judgment. That is a lie. I think that there are still some, unconscious things that happen there. We talk about symmetry right now. You look at someone, you take a glance, there's something unconsciously happening underneath, whether you admit it or not. You're sizing that person up and you're like, oh, that person has a cone-shaped head, or that person has a round-shaped head, or, like the eyes. And there are certain things that are happening naturally, right? Because that's the way that the mind works. So I find that I feel very fortunate and very grateful to have lived in different places, to have experienced different cultures. I lived in the south of France in Nice for quite some time, and it was one of the best experiences of my life. But there were also some things that were not so great, about it. It was the very first time that I think I actually ever truly experienced overt racism.
Really?
And a landlord that I had, and it was so strange because I'm such a Francophile. I love everything that's French. And that experience should have tainted my view of the French experience, but it didn't. And I think it requires you, again, to be very open. So I feel very fortunate. Good and bad experiences have come into my life. And anytime I meet someone, I want to be open. I want to get to know them. I want them to know that I see them, and that I'm not just like hearing them, but I'm listening to them as well.
You're like a female Emmett.
I'll take it. I will take that compliment.
I was just sitting here like, it's like I'm talking. It's really cool that you've come out with a book about Mondays, and that's your foray into the literary world, which helps people out. So what has this, as a vehicle, what is this book where's it going to take you? What do you have coming up? Speeches, workshops? What's going on in your life that you can connect with the public with?
Absolutely. So I am actually doing a couple of things. So I'm connecting with people on doing a few panels, because I think that we don't talk a lot about, the internal struggles, right? People would rather say that they have cancer than talk about having anxiety, because they think, oh, it's so small, or, I don't really know, how to express myself in this way, because no one's going to believe me, and everyone thinks it's so, anxiety. Like, everyone has anxiety. It's really not that big of a deal. So what I've been doing is actually connecting with people, coaching one-on-one, and then the other thing is just being involved in panels. And with this book, next year there's a book tour in the works, and so we'll hopefully be able to connect with people more on that tour, and get some seminars in place and some conferences in place. So that's the big idea. It literally just launched a couple of weeks ago, and we've gotten such great response from people. And if you actually go to helpmelovemondays.com, you will be able to receive weekly, inspirational messages from me as well, to help you start off that Monday, in addition to the 52 weekly messages in the book too. So you don't, it's helpmelovemondays.com.
You don't have that text message thing that pops up every Monday yet that says, "Hi, here's your."
You know what? I'm going to do that. I want to have that on everything. I want to have it on a bottle where it just like sings every Monday, and it's like, wake up, it's Monday, and that stick figure just jumps out at you.
Yeah, it'd probably be a picture like, who is this extremely symmetrical chocolate woman?
And I'm like, it's me. It's Wemi.
Now, moving to Los Angeles, where were you originally when you came to the United States? Because you say you moved to Los Angeles. Yes. Where were you prior?
So I was in Maryland, and I was in Maryland. I went to school in Maryland, ended up at University of Maryland, College Park. For a while, fantastic experience. I moved to the south of France in Nice for a little bit, came back, finished school, And then I tried Atlanta for a very hot minute. And then
A hot minute.
And it was not for me, which is okay. But I started exploring options. It was actually between New York and Los Angeles. And kind of speaking of destiny, I thought, New York would have made sense, right? Because Maryland is right there. But I remember my mom saying, why do you want to go to New York? LA is where you should be. And I thought, well, that's interesting that you say that. I'm like, Mom, what do you know about LA?
It's warm.
Right? That's all we all know. And I literally said to myself, I said, okay, Los Angeles, and I started seeing signs everywhere. Yeah. Randomly, I would see these signs, pieces of paper, Los Angeles, just right in front. And, I just followed my heart. And it was not an easy decision, as it's never ever easy whenever you are saying yes to life. And I said yes, and I found myself here.
You made me laugh when you were talking about Atlanta, because, you said you're trilingual, but, when you get in certain parts of the South, there's a whole different language that you'll have to, there's a dictionary a phonetic dictionary that you're going to have to digest before you even land. Because I take my wife down to Memphis and she looks like she stepped into Brazil. Just like what are they saying? Are they speaking English? I'm like, yes.
Yeah. I love it. I love that exploration. I'm still exploring the U.S. I have gone all the way to Dubai, and I've flown 17 hours to Dubai. And I just went to Vegas for the last time, I think 2 years ago. So for the first time 2 years ago.
I'm not a fan of Vegas.
Yeah, it was not my thing. So I think I'm still exploring what the U.S. actually has to offer.
So what does your family think about the moves that you've made and your extended family back home?
Yeah, I think they are incredibly proud. My circle is very small, and I'm so grateful for that. I think I have 5 amazing brothers and sisters, and my parents. They're incredibly supportive. They threw me a surprise party the other day, and I cried because I don't think that you can do it alone. And I feel incredibly fortunate to have a family that literally, if I say, oh, and my mom she's like this, like she'll watch TV and she'll say, I was watching something and I saw this guy, he came up with this invention, you can do that too. So she's the person that literally, she truly, genuinely believes that her kids can do everything.
That's
right. Say to her, I'm like, Mom, we're not here to do everything, even though I think that we can. We're only here to do some things. So you have to pick, those things really, really wisely. But they've been incredibly supportive. My siblings are so kind and so loving, and so they lift you up, and they're very honest. They give good feedback. So it's just good to have that balance. So I think they're just loving the ride right now. And I'm doing a lot of, press for this book right now. And they couldn't be more proud of everything that's happening. So it's such an incredible journey. They've heard me talk about it for so long too. So I think for them, it's almost like they all gave birth to this dream.
They did.
And they're so excited about it. So it's fun to have that.
All right. So what's your website?
Yes. So you can go to helpmelovemondays.com. And there, like I said, I'm able to feed you all of the information because I believe in feeding the soul. We are not feeding our souls enough. So you put that on, and I'm actually going to give away a free chapter of the book.
Good.
So if you go to helpmelovemondays.com, you'll get a free chapter of the book, and you'll be able to sign up for the weekly doses of inspiration as well, right in time for Monday.
Awesome. So what about Facebook, Twitter, Instagram? Yes. I almost said Tinder.
Everything. I know. Oh my! Would that not be? Actually, that could be a good place to connect about the soul. There might be some soul missing there.
I had to catch myself. I literally almost said, I was like, that's why I paused. I was like, Twitter.
Why not? Right? I love it. I love that your mind is like, why not? Why not Tinder? Why not Match? Why not any of the dating sites?
Be like, if you want to join my tribe, give me your email and swipe.
Exactly. Well, you can find the book also for more inspiration, TGIM Book on Instagram. Okay. Same thing on Facebook. Same thing on Twitter. So TGIM Book. And then you can also subscribe to the YouTube channel for Thank God It's Monday. Okay. So, and all of that information, again, I'm happy to send if it's easier for people, helpmelovemondays.com. And, you'll be able to be signed up for all of that.
So do you do any Facebook Lives?
You know what? We're going to be doing, I'm working right now on YouTube Live. So that's something that I'm playing around with, and we'll probably launch that at the beginning of the year.
Awesome.
So, because I think, the messages come out on Monday. It's been really great response. Actually, weirdly enough, I connect quite a bit with people on LinkedIn because I've been in the recruiting space for quite a long time. And think about the idea of Mondays and people being really miserable is usually tied to their jobs a lot of times. So a lot of people I connect with them on LinkedIn as well and share those messages. So you can also follow me on LinkedIn and you'll be able to get those messages too.
Awesome. Well, I really want to thank you for being on the Billionaire Lifestyle Podcast.
Yeah.
And
thank you so much, Emmett.
What is the one message if somebody was in an elevator with you and they looked kind of like, and you knew, and you knew they needed something, what would you tell them?
Yeah. I would say that this too will pass. Because everything is flux. Everything. There's nothing in this physical life that is permanent. That means that it will either end, it will transform. So you have to just embrace it. Whether you do something about it or not, nothing. There's no night that has been so dark that it did not give way to the morning. So no matter what, and it's true, no one has ever said, oh, we're still in the nighttime. Even on Game of Thrones, they're like, winter's coming. Winter came.
Yep.
Winter is here. Eventually, summer ends and winter comes, or winter ends and summer comes, or spring in the middle of that, or autumn. Everything changes. Everything in this life is flux. So even if you think the most permanent of situations and you are just incredibly miserable, you cannot find your way out. All you have to trust, even if you decide I feel so paralyzed that I can't do anything, all you have to do is trust that this too will end. This too will pass because everything is flux.
Awesome. Let me ask you this. In light of this new women's movement that is occurring, as we speak, and it seems to be divided. Mm-hmm. It seems to be like a 40 and over have a different mindset, and probably a 35 and under have a different mindset for the consent, Me Too, and interaction with relationships. You as a woman of color you're pretty much in the epicenter of it right now. What is your take on, and the fact that you come from, not being born natively in this country, how do you see these interactions between males and females, particularly in the millennial generation that it seems to be most prevalent or having the most dialogue about? Yeah.
I think what's happening is a lack of presence, right? It's a lack of, because it always comes back to that. And I've probably read The Power of Now, I think 50 times now. And
by Eckhart Tolle?
Yes. And it's a very simple message, right? It's not a new message. Jesus had the same message. Buddha talks about the same message. And, a lot of problems arise from us not being present. When I'm having a conversation with you and all I can hear you, but I'm not listening to you. So I'm not picking up on the signs because I hear you, but I hear what I want to hear. So, I'm not picking up on the signs. I'm not present. And so when someone says, this is what I'm communicating, and you're not getting what they're communicating, it means that you're not present. And so I think that what's happening is it had to happen because when something rots so badly, right? Eventually, you either have to amputate completely, which is brutal.
Yeah.
Even with a tree, for example, you had to pull all the way out, and it is brutal. It is hard to push that. And the pendulum swung so far to the other side of despicable that these women who have been since the beginning of time objectified, and it's a very interesting thing because you look at the pagans worshipped women.
Yeah.
They said that they were the center of life, that everything came from them. The power of the woman. I saw a birthing video the other day on Instagram. It was by accident. Someone sent it to me. And instead of I literally almost passed out, but I also looked at it and I thought, oh my God, the power of the woman.
Yes.
That's how strong women are. And so to think that, you don't oppress something that you're not afraid of. And since for a very long time, people have been, it's true, you don't oppress something that you're not afraid of. We look at racism and we look at people feel threatened. And so they feel the need to put someone else down. And I think women have felt that way since the beginning of time, is that there are all of these expectations that, you are bearing the child and you carry the brunt of it and you carry that burden. But yet you're not good enough, you're not strong enough, and you're the weaker sex. And so they feel that, and there's like this fear there, and so they oppress you. And it swung so far that people took the power so much that it's now swung all the way to the other end. And it has to do that before it comes back and balances. So that's what we're seeing right now, is that people that are saying, oh, it's overly sensitive environment, it's because the pendulum swung so far left.
Yeah.
And now it swung the other way, and now it has to balance itself out again, where we can start having this dialogue and this communication between the sexes. And it's not women fighting for women. Men also have to fight for women. Men also have to say, listen, and not because, you have a daughter or you have a wife. It's a human thing. The same way that I respect you, and I look at a man and I respect you, and I speak to you with respect, and I listen to you, I deserve the same.
You know what I find, and I found this when I I observed this when I was with my wife in Europe. Mm-hmm. And they didn't seem to have as much strife as like countries like America or Canada, or where it's not a monolithic culture. And I was like, they have different issues. They fight over stuff that we would find piddly, but it's because they don't have any differences to pick at each other about. Versus here in America or countries where it's a melting pot, we're just finding things to nitpick about and to be worried about. Because, after 2008, I had an epiphany, and I was like, I'm going to get really simple. You can't tell by looking at this room here. But I got rid of a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And lately I've been looking at people, and I've been seeing real beauty. Mm. Now, here's the caveat to that. Most of it is covered up, because I had this thing about how do we come to this? Like at the end of my podcast, I talk about being nude and appreciating yourself. And I say, we don't even appreciate the essence of what we are. And me and my wife were having this dialogue about this kind of scenario about sexuality and consent. And she says, it's really funny, and I find it pretty odd here, is that most little boys have never seen their mom nude. Mm. Most little girls have never seen their dad nude. So the only time that they associate the human body in its natural state or the underlyings of what you're wearing is sexual. So they can't see the person because they've been covered up, and they have this imagination, and then it's being permeated with society, like television and stuff like that.
And then it becomes shameful because there's no understanding. And it's why, again, I put the stick figure on Thank God It's Monday, because I didn't want to put a black woman, a white man, a Hispanic man, an Indian woman, whatever. I didn't, because at our core, that stick figure is us naked. That's who we are, at the very core of who we are. And I think that when we came, into this world, it was as that with very little baggage, right? And life situations add that baggage to it. And then we don't hear each other and we don't listen to each other. And I think in Europe, there's a lot that's also wrong as much as there's a lot that's right. And there are conversations that are happening. There are conversations that should be happening. The Me Too conversation is happening there too. But, there are a lot of people who are like, well, are these women just really sensitive? And, things like that. And, oh, should I be scared for my little boy's, life? And it's the same thing when we also talk about race. Like, we're essentially saying, like, don't just see me. See me. That's all we all want as human beings, is that we want to be seen, we want to be heard, we want to be recognized, we want to be acknowledged. That's all. It's very simple. Very simple needs. And if you strip everything out, those are such simple needs. If you meet someone and you say, the purpose of me meeting you, the purpose of me connecting with you and talking with you is to see you, is to know you, is to hear you, is to acknowledge you.
Man, I'm glad you're not a dude, because that was some game right there.
I'm going to go out next time and just say it to someone. I see you. I hear you. I acknowledge you. And obviously you don't have to say that, but I think that they will feel the presence of that when you go into it, because you're not looking to say the next thing, when they're talking. You're actually saying, and it's hard for us, right? Because we're immediately thinking of, well, I'm afraid of the space. So let me think about what I'm going to say. And it's like, silence is awkward, but it's also okay.
Yeah, that's true. Because one of my favorite movie between my oldest, youngest daughter and I is Fight Club. Mm. And there's a line, there's a dialogue that Tyler Durden and Edward Norton the characters are having. He says, most people are just waiting for their turn to talk in a conversation. My daughter and I, we always look at each other when we're hearing that in a conversation and go,
You're doing it. You're doing it.
Yeah.
I can see you're thinking. You're just waiting.
Right. Now, you talked about the pendulum swing, and I'm going to close on this.
Yeah.
I'm starting to see this because I interview a great deal of women. And what's really cool about it is I've had women really open up and share things with me on and off the podcast that they say, like, I've never talked about that with anyone, which I feel blessed to make someone feel that comfortable. But it does seem like the pendulum is swinging, and what could happen is what was done to women will be done to men.
Yeah.
Do you see that as well? Or I see these women segregating themselves so much, like, okay, we're having a group for empowerment and it's just women. Like, there's a guy that could really benefit, or there's a guy that could really get some understanding from just observing what you're doing versus you excluding them. Do you think that's going to change, or over time it's just going to meld out?
Yeah. I am a person that never thinks of exclusion. I think that true conversations and real conversations can only happen when we are truly open. If you clench your fist and you clench it really tightly, nothing can come in and nothing can actually leave. But if you open up your hand and your palm and you unfist, basically, you just open it up, everything flows in and everything flows out. And it feels a lot easier than kind of like holding on to it. It's the same thing. It's like you talk about anger. It's like drinking poison and wishing the other person will die. You're only hurting yourself. Excluding other people from the conversation is only hurting the conversation. So I think that, again, we have to leave for a little room for a little bit of grace for people to catch up and for feelings to settle and for forgiveness to come into the picture so that we can now open up the conversation and recognize that, we need allies. As a woman of color, it's the same thing, is that I will never say that I don't want to have this conversation with you because you are not a person of color and you cannot understand what it feels like. Perhaps you'll get it. Perhaps you don't. You can't know my experience, just like I can't know yours, but I can listen and I can understand. I can seek to understand. And I think that that's the key here, is that if we all seek to understand on both sides, the conversation will make a larger impact than if we actually exclude. So I think right now what's happening again is that other extreme is happening, but it'll settle because it always does. You throw something at on a pond and it's like the ripples happen, but eventually it settles again. And I think that will happen too. I don't fear that there will be an intense exclusion and that we will be worse off than we are. I think that it's messy right now because that's life. It has to be a mess in order for us to rebuild. But I think that we will find ourselves on a better side, for sure.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was my beautiful friend, Wemi, on the Billionaire Lifestyle Podcast. And you know how this ends. Ladies and gentlemen, when you have a moment, particularly when you're going into the shower, so you can cleanse yourself of whatever day grime that's on you, whatever thoughts, let the water roll over you. Cleanse your body and then step out the shower and then drop your towel and take some time to be with the you that came here, not with the Gucci, not with the Kmartables, not with all that stuff. Just look at your nude body, because this is where the billionaire starts to shine. Because if you look at just the dermis, the epidermis, that's composed of at least 1 trillion cells, which means you are a billionaire. 30 days after your inception, when one cell met another, they began to make a dance. 30 days later, 2 to the power of 30 is over 1 billion. You're a billionaire, so live life. You are a human being. Hue, which means we are people of color under a sun. We are in the image of man. Now it's time for you to perfect the being, which is the experience. Live for experiences, not things. Look at those galaxies in your eyes and realize that as above, so below. As you think it affects the body. As above, so below. And remember There's somebody who loves you. And if you think there isn't, think of my voice and listen to this. I love you. Peace.